Most men spend their lives guessing which path to take. Lucas Bridges was not most men. At 35, he trusted his gut more than any church sermon or town council argument. His hands were rough, his patience thin, and his temper known to flare faster than dry grass catching a spark. Folks in Abilene, Texas said he was a man built out of sun, sweat, and stubbornness. The day he stepped into Green and Holland law office, he figured he'd sign a few papers, take his uncle's land, and ride home. Instead, the lawyer rolled out a will that hit him like a punch to the ribs. Lucas stared at the paper while the brass pendulum clock on the wall ticked like a gun trigger. Douglas Green adjusted his spectacles and read the rules again. You'll inherit the ranch and the bank account only if you do two things. Raise one pig alone for 9 months and live with a wife for 6 months without filing a single complaint. Lucas blinked. A pig and a wife? What kind of fool test is that? Your uncle's kind, Douglas replied. One dead pig, one complaint, even one written scrap of trouble between you and your wife, and you walk away empty. Lucas spat in the spittoon. You expect me to pamper a hog like it's a Sunday guest? Rules is rules, Mr. Pody. Bridges. Maybe another man would have walked out, but Lucas wasn't raised to back down from any challenge, even a crazy one. He rode out that evening with the will folded in his pocket and anger burning in his chest. If this pig was his test, he'd meet it head on. The ranch sat 12 miles southwest of Abilene, 40 acres of grassland, a weathered 2-room cabin, a gray barn, and a windmill creaking with each turn. Not much, but it was more than he owned yesterday, and the bank account held $800, enough to build a future if he earned it right. First thing, he went to Horry's Feed and Supply and bought a healthy feeder pig from Jeremy Cobb. The little spotted gilt had sharp eyes and steady legs. Hardy stock, Jeremy said. She might outsmart you. Lucas grunted. Let her try. He built her a sturdy pen behind the barn, oak rails, cedar posts, a lean-to for shelter, and a fresh water system lined right from the windmill. He color-coded his buckets, red for feed, blue for water, green for slop. Everything in its place, everything with purpose. This time, anger would not rule him. Whenever his temper rose, he walked to the barn, where a hand-painted sign hung, 3 breaths before action. He'd read it out loud until his pulse slowed. Then he'd return to the job. The first weeks passed smooth. The pig learned his voice. She kept herself clean, ate well, and watched him with curious eyes. Lucas kept a daily log in a grease-stained notebook. September 15th, clear. Pig healthy. No signs of trouble. September 16th, light rain, added straw. Pig stayed dry. It was simple work, steady work. But October arrived with storms that ruined simplicity. 3 days of hard rain turned the roads to mud and washed out Mill Creek Bridge. His feed ran low. He mixed cornmeal, oats, and beans from his pantry to make a mash, hoping it would hold her over. She ate it, but he worried. If she died, his inheritance died with her. Then came the real trouble. A water line burst under the pen during a freezing night, flooding the ground into a muddy lake. The pig shivered on her shelter platform, confused and cold. Lucas felt old fire rise hot in his chest. Months of effort and a busted pipe threatened to ruin everything. He marched to the barn, read his sign, breathed slow until the heat faded. Then he fixed the pipe and built a better system, a 50-gallon barrel, a float valve, and a safer trough setup. Hard work, cold work. But he solved it with his hands instead of his temper. The pig seemed to approve, but 2 weeks later, sickness struck him like a hammer. Fever, aches, dizziness so strong he barely made it to the pen. For 2 days he lay in bed, drifting in and out while the pig went hungry and her water fouled. On the 3rd day, silence scared him more than any noise. He staggered outside and saw the pig lying still, breathing quick and shallow. She was sick now, too. He dragged himself to hitch the wagon and somehow loaded her alone, board by board, coaxing her with grain. The journey to town nearly killed them both. At the vet's office, Manuel Coe shook his head. You two caught the same fever. She's dehydrated. Weak. I'll treat her. But you need rest too. They returned home together, two stubborn souls fighting the same sickness. Lucas built a recovery setup right beside the cabin so he could watch her from the kitchen window. Fresh bedding, warm shelter, simple mash, clean water. He slept on a cot inside, waking every few hours to check on her breathing. Day by day, she grew stronger, and so did he. By November, the pig was thriving again. Lucas realized something as he wrote in his notebook. He wasn't fighting his temper anymore. He was beating it. But the will had 2 trials, not 1. And the second test, finding a wife for 6 months of peaceful living, would demand more patience than any pig could. He didn't know it yet, but the hardest part of his journey was waiting just down the road. By the time November turned into December, Lucas knew the pig test was nearly done. She was healthy, strong, and ready for market when the 9 months ended. But the second condition of the will weighed on him heavier than any sack of feed. A wife. 6 months. No complaints. Not a single written scrap of trouble. A pig was predictable. A wife, well, that was a storm a man couldn't prepare for with hammer and fence wire. But rules were rules. He cleaned himself up for the first time in months, shaved the scruff off his jaw, and rode into town. His boots still held the dust of the ranch, but he hoped the rest of him looked respectable enough. His first stop was Hurry's Feed and Supply, not for supplies, but for advice. Jeremy Cobb knew everyone. "I'm looking for a wife," Lucas said. Jeremy blinked.
Say that again?
"You heard me." Jeremy rubbed his beard, thinking, "Well, there's Florence Estey, school teacher. Smart as they come, but she expects a man to look fancy every day. Not sure she'd take to ranch life." "Anyone not expecting a miracle?" Lucas asked. "Emily Guzman," Jeremy said slowly. "Widow. Runs a boarding house. Practical woman. She knows how to manage people and a household." That sounded promising. Practical beat fancy any day of the week. So Lucas rode to Elm Street where the tidy 2-story house with lace curtains stood. The sign read Guzman House. Clean rooms, fair prices. But it was the woman who opened the door that caught Lucas off guard. She was about 32, brown hair pinned in a neat twist, steady eyes and hands that looked strong enough to carry a life, but gentle enough to mend one. "You must be Lucas Bridges," she said. "Word travels fast." "Yes, ma'am. I'm looking to speak about a marriage arrangement." She stepped aside. "Come inside, then. Let's talk proper." Her parlor was clean, warm, and smelled like fresh bread. She poured coffee and sat across from him, her posture calm, unafraid. "You seem decent," she began, "but I need peace to run a home." "I've heard about your temper. What assurance do I have you won't bring chaos?" Lucas respected her bluntness. "My uncle's will says I must live with a wife 6 months without filing a complaint. Seems to me a man who complains ain't much of a husband." Emily studied him. "And after 6 months, then we see if we suit each other." She nodded slowly. "I won't be forced into intimacy. I take my time with trust." Understood. They talked for an hour. Terms, boundaries, expectations. Emily didn't want romance. She wanted stability, safety, routine. Lucas understood that more than she guessed. When he stood to leave, her voice softened. "I hope this works, Lucas. I'm tired of being alone." Something in her tone struck him deep. Her loneliness felt familiar. They set the wedding for March 15. Lucas prepared the ranch for her arrival, cleaned the cabin, scrubbed the kitchen, bought curtains. He even moved the pig pen farther away so the smell wouldn't trouble her. He wasn't just trying to pass a test anymore. Something about Emily made him want to be a better man. Their wedding was simple, just the minister, 2 witnesses, and a meal afterward. Emily wore a blue dress she'd sewn herself. Lucas wore a borrowed suit, too big at the shoulders. But when he said his vows, he meant every word. The first weeks of marriage were surprisingly peaceful. Emily was organized and steady. She cooked well, kept the home in order, and asked good questions about ranch life. And in the evenings, they'd sit on the porch and talk about hopes, fears, mistakes, and futures neither had dared imagine before. Then one quiet night, she took his hand and whispered a soft yes. Lucas kissed her gently at first, then deeper, slower. "Once I use my tongue on you, there's no escape," he teased in a low voice, half playful, half warning. Emily trembled and leaned into him. "I surrender." Their bond deepened that night, sealing more than a marriage contract. But April brought its own storm. Emily began waking sick every morning. At first, Lucas thought it was a spring cold. Then she missed her monthly cycle. Her hands shook as she set down a cup of water. "I'm carrying a child," she whispered. Joy hit him first, then fear. Pregnancy was hard enough for any woman, but their cabin was small, their money tight, and the smell of the pig carried on the wind. Soon, Emily couldn't stand cooking smells, his work clothes, even certain soaps. Her emotions turned unpredictable. She cried without warning, grew frustrated easily, and worried endlessly about money. "I can't stand the smell of that pig," she said one morning. "It's everywhere. I'll build a wash station. I'll clean up before I enter." It won't help. "I smell everything." He tried anyway. But nothing was enough. Stress tightened around them like a rope. They snapped at each other more often. Small arguments turned into long silences. She worried about money while he felt helpless to fix it. Their physical closeness faded as her sickness worsened and guilt built up between them. Then May delivered the blow that nearly ended everything. A pump seal broke in the night, flooding their kitchen 2 inches deep. Emily stood in her nightgown, crying, overwhelmed. On the table sat a formal complaint letter she had written days earlier. All it needed was a signature. One signature, and Lucas would lose everything. He wanted to shout, to blame, to slam his fist into the wall. But he saw fear in Emily's eyes, the fear of failing him, failing their child, failing herself. He walked to the barn, read his sign. 3 breaths before action. When he returned, he fixed the pump, cleaned the water, and told her gently, "Sit outside. I'll take care of this." That night, Emily confessed, "I almost filed the complaint. I came close. But watching you today, you've changed, Lucas." He didn't answer, but he knew she was right. They created something new, a system for their lives. Morning oatmeal ready before Emily woke. A ventilation hood Lucas built over the stove. Weekly budget meetings, dividing chores clearly. A rule, 48 hours before any complaint. Oh. Slowly, peace returned. Then, October came. Emily went into labor. When their son finally arrived, small, warm, crying loud enough to shake the walls, Lucas felt something move inside him he didn't have a name for. He loved his boy, and he loved Emily. 2 weeks later, Douglas Green confirmed it officially. The pig survived. No complaints filed. Lucas had passed the test, but he didn't walk out of that office thinking about inheritance. He thought about his wife, his son, and the life he was building, a life he wanted to keep. When Lucas rode back from town with the inheritance papers in his saddlebag, the sun sat low over the Texas plains, casting long gold lines across the land. It wasn't the money he thought about. It wasn't even the 40 acres he now legally owned. It was the faces waiting for him at home. Emily sitting by the window with a shawl over her shoulders and baby Byron sleeping in her arms. He had passed the test, but the truth settled deep in his chest as he tied his horse outside the cabin. It was never really about the pig or the rules. It was about becoming the kind of man who could build something that lasted. Life didn't slow down after that. With a newborn in the house, each day brought new challenges. Byron cried at all hours, especially when the wind howled across the plains. Emily tried to rest, but her body was still healing, and the smallest tasks left her breathless. Lucas took over most of the kitchen duties, though his cooking was plain as river stones. "You're burning the beans again," Emily said gently one evening. "I like 'em crispy," Lucas replied, though both knew that wasn't true. She smiled at him, small but warm, and it steadied him more than any lesson in his uncle's will. By winter, the pig was sold at market for $26, enough to cover the doctor's fee and stock the pantry. Lucas put the rest toward repairing the roof and strengthening the barn before the cold hit. He wanted Emily and their son warm, safe, and never worried about what tomorrow might bring. One cold morning, as frost dusted the windows and the well pump squeaked in the yard, Lucas carried Byron in his arms while Emily kneaded bread. The baby had his father's stubborn jaw and his mother's steady eyes. "He's going to be a handful," Emily said. "All Bridges' men are," Lucas replied with quiet pride. By spring, Emily had regained her strength, and their routine settled into something smooth and steady. They had their systems: morning chores, budget nights, Sunday planning, evening porch time. What began as a survival method during pregnancy became the foundation of their marriage. They didn't fight often, and when they did, the 4 8-hour rule kept their tempers from turning into something sharp or ugly. Then, in early summer, Emily told him she was expecting again. Lucas froze mid-step, a bucket of water in his hands. "Another?" he said. "Another?" she confirmed, eyes shining with fear and hope wrapped into one. Instead of panic, something like joy flooded him. He set the bucket down, walked to her, and held her close. "We'll manage," he said. "We always do." Their second son, Rocky, arrived in January. Loud, healthy, with lungs strong enough to shake dust from the rafters. Life with 2 children meant less sleep, more noise, and twice the trouble. But it also meant twice the laughter, twice the moments where Lucas came in from the fields and found Emily rocking both boys, humming a soft tune that made the whole world feel steady. The ranch grew too, little by little. Lucas applied everything he had learned from the tests: planning before problems, fixing things early, building systems instead of waiting for chaos. The pig pen became a permanent structure. The fences were repaired on a schedule, not in panic. Feed was stored under cover. He even dug a proper well closer to the cabin so Emily wouldn't have to walk far. He felt proud. Not in the loud, bragging way of some men, but in the quiet, certain way of someone who had built his life with his own hands. 3 years passed. The boys grew taller. The ranch grew stronger. Lucas and Emily grew closer. Their arguments still came, but they never broke anything. Not trust, not peace, not love. Then, one summer afternoon, a letter arrived from Douglas Green. "A final condition in your uncle's will. Open only after 3 successful years of ranch operation." Lucas opened the envelope with steady hands. Inside was a simple note and another deed. "Lucas, if you are reading this, then you have earned more than land. You have earned the right to build something that will outlast you. Enclosed is the deed to the 160 acres adjoining your property. Build wisely. Live wisely." Lucas walked slowly outside. Emily was hanging laundry. Byron and Rocky were chasing each other through the dust. The sun warmed his back. The land stretched wide and open before them. 160 acres? Emily whispered, looking at the paper. "Good pasture, too," Lucas said. "Enough to build something real. What do we do with it?" Lucas looked out at the horizon. Build a ranch worth passing on. They expanded carefully. Lucas bought cattle once the water sources were ready. Emily started a larger garden, selling jars of preserved vegetables to the store in town. Everything they touched grew, not because of luck, but because of careful planning and the discipline he had learned from a pig and a marriage test. One evening, years after their hardest days, Lucas and Emily sat together on the porch while the boys slept inside. Fireflies blinked across the yard. The windmill spun slow and steady in the breeze. Emily leaned her head on his shoulder. "You know," she said softly, "your uncle might have been wiser than we thought." Lucas chuckled. "Never thought raising a hog and controlling my temper would lead to all this." She smiled. "Well, some lessons are learned the hard way." Lucas kissed her temple. His voice dipped low, full of warmth and mischief. "Once I use my tongue on you, there's no escape." She laughed, a sound that still melted him. "Is that so, Mr. Roundel? Bridges's?" She curled into him, safe and happy. The porch light glowed soft over the land they built together. The brass pendulum clock, once a symbol of pressure, now sat on their mantel, ticking peacefully through the life they had earned. The tests were long over. The life they built was just beginning. That life, steady, loving, hard-earned, was the real inheritance all along.